Awesome. Great, thank you. We're going to go ahead and get
We're
started.
going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the first RSCA in 5 of the academic year. I'm Rich Mokarski. I'm the Associate VP for Research. I really appreciate everybody coming in person and online. That's what that camera's for, I guess. It's nice to see everybody, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to come and listen to our amazing faculty talk about what I think is an incredibly important topic, artificial intelligence ethics and the intersections therein. Before we start there, I just want to mention that RSCA in 5 is our flagship dissemination series. This is an opportunity for our faculty to engage with the broader community, and we hope you'll take the time to really invest in their talks, but also we're changing the format just a little bit, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. We really hope you'll engage with them there and then stick around for some networking afterwards. Everybody who lives here in Silicon Valley understands that this recent craze of AI and ML, it didn't start with the recent craze, right? This is not new. Our faculty, our students have been working in the space for at least a decade, if not more. And so it's great that it's getting national prominence and we're hearing things about it. But what's really interesting about the talks today is to show how the rise of public consciousness, the rise of how the more sophistication of tools of artificial intelligence intersect with different sectors of our lives. Everything from how we schedule ourselves to how we move, to how we communicate. And to how production manufacturing happens. And so it's really exciting to hear about that, to see those intersections, and to think about the broader impacts of that, not just the can we do it, but why do we do it, how do we do it, and what are the implications beyond that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shannon Miller, the Dean of Humanities and Arts, to set the conversation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a great crowd here, and I imagine there's a great crowd on Zoom as well. I am the Dean of the College of Humanities and Arts. I'm delighted to offer a quick introduction to today's RSCA in 5 on artificial intelligence and ethics. As with the technologies that surround us here in Silicon Valley, and which change the lives of so many of us, from social media to cell phones to algorithms in our everyday life, we need to consider both the advantages that they provide, but also the dangers that lie within those possibilities. With all technology, we have a responsibility to make sure it works in every way, and that working includes engineering the technology for good to protect our privacy, to protect our democracy, and to maintain, not mute, our values. AI promises advances in medical treatment, the limitation of routine and tedious work, the ability to analyze big data quickly, which could benefit any number of fields, which also could provide us with solutions to complex ideas or complex issues quickly. It will make autonomous driving cars possible, and it is making them possible, and it will increasingly be part of powering robots that help with many tasks, from manufacturing to vacuuming my carpet. I love my Roomba. It will reshape our world, if not completely, in innumerable ways over the next several decades. And yet, every day we hear about the many dangers that lurk within these possibilities. The recent hack of 23andMe's data, the effort of Vietnam to place the Predator software on U.S. officials' phone, and a recent New York Times article on the current insufficiency of self-driving cars, and these are literally from this week, remind us of the dangerous possibilities when technology is attacked, misused, or pursued without proper guardrails. But with AI, the line between the technologies for good and for evil will become much more complex. AI fakes of Donald Trump or Joe Biden doing a McDonald's ad, which have been all over my YouTube feed this week for reasons I do not understand, seem amusing and potentially innocuous, and ones of Tom Hanks doing a dental commercial that he did not authorize seem strange but not chilling. And yet, as the technology improves and the quality of deep fakes becomes impossible to distinguish from what is real, the dangers become immense. I have been rereading 1984, which the theater department will produce this spring, and totalitarianism is not just violence against the body. It is violence against facts, history, and memory. The governing vision for the state in Orwell's classic novel is summarized in the phrase, "Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past." In 1984, this takes the form of an active rewriting of newspapers and all other documentation to make the past fit the present ideological government story. History becomes infinitely rewritable and ultimately completely revisable to create the truth you wish to force on an otherwise unaware and consequently compliant public. The potential for AI to participate in this process is already here. A strong sense of ethical limits on how it is used needs to be part of its actual engineering alongside legislative controls and other ethical limits. I'm excited about 5 Risk in 5 presentations today that take up many of these issues from faculty from a diverse range of fields, including computer engineering, philosophy, art, and justice studies. Most are considering the protections that AI can offer us, specifically in transportation or in preventing child pornography. Many see the ways that a focus on ethics and equity can address everything from recommender software to social media algorithms. And the question of creativity and the growing threats around copyright will be the subject of one of the talks. I'm looking forward to learning a great deal in the next 40 minutes as our SJSU researchers illuminate the possibilities for AI alongside the challenges. The challenges it is and will pose as the technology becomes faster, smarter, and ever more present in our lives. I'm also looking forward to hearing the path these 5 speakers can chart through this ever-growing digital decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, for framing that so well. Really appreciate your words. I'm going to pass it off to our MC, Jessica Trapp.
I'd like to welcome everybody here in the room and then also everybody online. And I think the first job is for me to do a little bit of housekeeping. I am the Director of Research, Senior Director of Research Services in the Office of Research. I realize that is the least informative title ever. So what it means is that I oversee the Research Compliance Unit, and then I also oversee the Research Development Group. So let's see, do we have our housekeeping slide? Thank you so much. All right, everyone. So we are recording today's events and we are live streaming on Vimeo. So welcome to everybody who's joining us online. How many folks do we have online? 20 people. So thanks for tuning in. So this structure will be a little bit different than our past RSCA in 5 events. So for each speaker, you'll have 5-minute presentations in succession. The Q&A will be at the end, so please save your questions, make a note, and then at the end we will have a sort of panel with all of our speakers so that we can facilitate a more holistic presentation about the ethics around artificial intelligence. The in-person attendees, if you do need to leave, I understand, please try to do so during the applause breaks. And then finally, there will be lunch after the shared Q&A session. They're setting that up over there. And we encourage you, please stick around, have a bite to eat, talk to our presenters, talk to the folks in the room, network, mingle. We're very glad to have you here. Just a few instructions for the presenters. You are allotted 5 minutes. It's in the name, with 5 slides. To assist with pacing, we have our alerts at 3 minutes. Look like that. And 1 minute remaining. When the thank you slide comes up, that's the hook. That will, when your time, that'll come on the screen when your time is up. So it'll be time to wrap it up. If you are the next presenter, we will cue your presentation up for you. And then, as you've noted, there's no microphone today, so please just do your best theater kid projection so that everybody in the room can hear you. So then we have our QR code and all of our presenters. You can scan it to access their biographies. And with that, I am going to hand it over to our first speaker, Dr. Magdalene Aronaki.
Here. Okay. So good morning, everyone. So let me get straight into that. Even if you don't know how they work, you definitely use them. We use them every day if we're using the web to pick the next movie to watch, the next song to listen to, what to buy, who to connect with, and they feed our news and our social media feeds. So they power them. So how do the system work? They're machine learning algorithms. They need data. And the type of data these algorithms need is user data. The core part of them lies here. It comes in the symbol form of users, showing us their preferences or ratings for items. And the main premise is that similar users who have liked in the past similar items, we find the similarities and we leverage them to recommend new items to the users. Of course, in today's interconnected world, we have way more than just ratings. We have access to a big amount of data from users commenting on things, liking things, connecting with other users, relationship with other users. So right now, what happens online, what we have online is hybrid recommender systems, which use ratings plus many others. So these systems rely heavily on data. And what happens if we don't have data or we don't have good quality or enough data? Then we get really bad recommendations. These are just examples from recommendations that I've gotten. I will stay in the one on the right. So many years ago, I took a Coursera class on statistical analysis, and since then, Coursera really thinks I should get a machine learning specialization, which is clearly not a very good recommendation. So we definitely need the data for these systems to work well and for us to have a good experience. But things can get really ugly. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Fake news, misinformation, hate speech, privacy concerns, bias. I mean, there are many ways we can misuse this technology and this data. This is a nice, let me move here. This is a nice slide that comes from this paper that discusses 7 areas of concern for recommender systems. Of course, each of them is a very big topic. Today, I want to talk a bit about privacy, and I work with them in that regard. This is a work I did with my student Derek Lilienthal, and my colleagues Dusty Onkin and his student Paul Mello. We just submitted a few hours ago to a conference, so it's very fresh. Our idea is to use generative AI to create privacy-sensitive recommender systems. So for those of you who might not be familiar with generative AI, you're definitely familiar with what you see up here, the nice apps like Wally or like DALL-E, not Wally, or Midjourney, where you give a prompt or an image and it comes up, it generates some new content. So we said, okay, let's leverage this technology and generate data. So what our system does here is we use a couple of generative AI models, variational autoencoders and diffusion models, and we take as input data we use for training recommender system models, and we create as output new synthetic data. And our result showed really promising. We had really promising results. We showed improvement, both if you augment with the synthetic data the original data, but also if you just use the new synthetic data instead of the training data to train and generate models, and this somehow can be used to help not using the actual user data and having access to them. So this is very short. We're very excited about this work. It's just beginning and we have really good results. But for the last minute, I want to put my other hat on. I'm also the director of machine learning in Masters in Artificial Intelligence in San Jose State. And even since the beginning, the inception of this Masters, I wanted to introduce an AI and ethics class. But I think right at this point, we should all as a campus think about this, also offering such opportunities to all of our students. I think it's a very important topic. It's interdisciplinary, as today's talk show. We cannot do it alone in the computer engineering or the computer science department. We need the help from other disciplines to inform that. So hopefully, I'm talking with some people already. Hopefully, we can have more than one even such courses. And with that, that's my cue. So hopefully the discussion will continue after that.
Thank you so much, Professor Aronaki. So next up, we have Dr. Etienne Brown from the Philosophy Department, who will be talking about algorithmic amplification and democratic equality. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Etienne from Philosophy. You can clap if you want. I'm Etienne from Philosophy. The title of my talk is Algorithmic Amplification and Democratic Equality. So I wanted to start by kind of reflecting upon one of the central reasons why we care about the fact that we have a protected right to free speech. I think it's fair to say that speech allows us to influence the minds of others, and as a result, to shape the democratic decision-making process, right? So democratic legitimacy kind of rests on the presupposition that every citizen impacted by a decision be provided with an equal opportunity to influence it. But equal opportunity for influence not only requires formal procedures like equal voting rights, but also a fair distribution of what we could call voice, right? So the capacity to reach others through speech. Now, we live at a time in a country where many people, including me, think that we're kind of falling short of this democratic ideal of equal influence. So here's an example of that. Ronald Dworkin, which is an influential philosopher, wrote the following: "It may be objected in most democracies that right now the right to free speech has little value for many citizens. Ordinary people with no access to great newspapers or television broadcasts have little chance to be heard. This is a genuine problem. It may be that genuine free speech requires more than just freedom from legal censorship. We must try to find other ways of providing those without money or influence a real chance to make their voices heard." And this is really the kind of philosophical insight that's the core of my current research project, right? So we must try to find other ways of providing those without money or influence a real chance to make their voices heard. Now, Dworkin was thinking mainly about newspapers and television. He's writing in 2009, just before the kind of takeoff of social media platforms. But I think that this reflection applies just as well to mainstream social media platforms. So I think that today we live in an environment where both conservative and progressive are worried that their speech is kind of unfairly de-amplified on mainstream social media platforms. I'm happy to say more about this in the Q&A. One of the problems, as I see it, is that money, leisure time, and what we can call digital literacy are resources that are unequally distributed in society, but this distribution really has a decisive impact on who gets heard in the digital public sphere. So here's a very simple example of that. If you have a lot of money, you can pay for amplification, right? You can pay to have your speech boosted on social media platforms and kind of crowd out the voices of others. I also think that what Magdalene talked about, recommender systems are a part of the problem, right? So what are recommender systems? They're algorithms that determine what you see first, basically, when you log into social media, the kind of first 10 items. Now, currently, the systems optimize for engagement. That means that they're designed to make you like or comment or stay longer on the platform. And the reason why social media platforms choose engagement optimization is that it maximizes profit, right? The more time you spend on social media, then the more targeted advertising you see and the more profit your behavior generates. So what I do in my current research project is basically that I raise the following question. Instead of optimizing for engagement, what if we optimize for something else, right? What if we try to imagine a different kind of social media platforms? And more specifically, what would it look like if we tried to optimize for democratic equality? Now, this leads me to defend or to propose, let us say more moderately, 3 measures that could kind of modify the structure of social media platforms. Here they are. So first, platforms could kind of fix a ceiling. That means that it could fix a maximum number of algorithmically recommended impressions for most posts. I'm happy to discuss why I say most posts and not all posts. Symmetrically, they could fix kind of a minimum number of algorithmically recommended impressions for most posts. And I also propose a measure that I call affirmative amplification, which basically the idea is that recommender systems could be designed to kind of correct bias on social media platforms and amplify the voices of marginalized groups. So I think that would be a starting point, 3 measures that would kind of equalize amplification. If you're interested in discussing the relationship between democratic equality, recommender systems, and social media platforms, please reach out to me. You'll find my contact info on my website. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brown. Again, as you think of questions, as the speakers are talking, I know I'm jotting them down. Please jot them down for discussion at the end. And our next speaker is Mahima Okumbe Suresh. Welcome. She'll be talking about a safety framework for e-scooter riders. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the talk, I'll be covering three main things. First, I'll be talking about the framework itself and the algorithms we use. And then I'll talk about the need for understanding how it works the way it does. And finally, talk about how we can make the algorithm suitable for human riders. Um, so the framework itself, Safer, it's a framework that's meant to make e-scooters safer on the streets. It's heavily motivated by the increasing number of crashes. This graph actually stops in 2019, but I have a graph that is beyond that. We do see a dip in 2020, quite obviously, but it does pick back up, and the number of crashes is significantly higher in the recent times. So the vision of how we make e-scooters safer is, on the one side, we have rider assistance systems that can provide real-time insights to riders on their safety, mainly provide them with situational awareness. And on the other side, we have city surveillance or city-level insights that can not just prevent crashes, but also prevent near misses, which will eventually lead to crashes. In terms of the challenges and opportunities for each of them, this is a very wordy slide, so I will not spend too much time on this. Mention that from the rider's perspective or from the real-time perspective, we have a lot of challenges in terms of the constraints of the devices we have and the type of algorithms we can run in order to provide real-time insights. And on the city side, we have a lot of non-obvious extensions to existing work that needs to be done in order to do this more efficiently. So going into the rider assistance systems, I picked one algorithm that I've been working on called depth estimation. It's a class of algorithms that look at a scene, a traffic scene, for example, and figure out how far away each pixel in the image is from the camera. It's easy to do this if you have two cameras that are calibrated and at a specific distance. But if the cameras, and if you have a single camera and a single image, it's hard to tell how far away an object is. Because depth estimation as such tries to figure out depth from two images of a single object from different perspectives. For example, if you want to figure out the depth of an object, if you place it very close to your eye and cover one eye or the other one, you can see how the position of the object switches between the two images. That's the way depth estimation works. To do it with a single camera, you can still do it if you have motion, meaning if the object is or the camera is moving. And monodepth 2, this algorithm is a state-of-the-art in monocular depth estimation. But it takes way too long to provide real-time insights to riders. So we made a few optimizations, mainly in three directions, one called quantization, another called pruning, and finally we made the neural network itself smaller, used a smaller backbone to improve the performance. And if we just look at the numbers, meaning how bad our system is as compared to monodepth, it tells us that we lose some accuracy. But then if we just look at the images, there's a bigger one over here, we don't miss a whole lot of obstacles in this scene. So the first step we took from this result is we were trying to figure out how the depth estimation is figuring out the depth of objects. To do that, our current research is taking depth estimation models trained on road scenes and trying to use that to make inferences on other kinds of images or other kinds of video streams. For example, right now we are looking at how drone videos can be analyzed with depth estimation and see if it does equally well with drone images as it does with road images. To figure out what parts of the images it's picking up. So that's one part of the research. We are trying to take our results and trying to break it open and understand why it works the way it does. And the other part is we are trying to look at inference metrics that tell us how good depth estimation is, and taking it away from pixel level metrics where we are telling, okay, based on how far the pixels are. Oh, am I done? Sorry. So yeah, basically this is the last part of the talk anyway. So instead of looking at pixel level metrics for how bad depth estimation is or how good it is, we look at more human relevant metrics. That there are a lot of techniques here, and I can answer them in the Q&A. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Akumbe Suresh. Next up, we have Professor Rhonda Holberton from the Department of Art and Art History, and she will be presenting on. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, me.
AI, creativity, and copyright. Thank you so much.
I'm going to read from my notes. If I don't, I'm going to talk for way more than 5 minutes. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about creative uses of AI, and then I'm going to end up my presentation talking a little bit about copyright. I'm going to be talking about copyright and intellectual property, both in terms of input. So these are the data that AI models are trained on. And I'm also going to be talking about it in terms of output. So these are the actual creations of AI systems when you give it a prompt. I also want to start out by discussing how I collaborated with AI to create a recent exhibition consisting of sculptures, animations, audio, paintings, and even 2 lines of unique fragrances. I started out by trying to come up with a sculpture in my mind. And then I was meditating on what it means to create, what it means to create life, what stewardship of life on this planet looks like, and these kind of slippages between the biological and technological systems that we interact with. When I came up, then I tried to recreate the sculptures that I created in my mind using DALL-E, and then use material processes to realize the most kind of what I would call successful resulting prompts. And I collaborated with folks from the Foundry here at San Jose State and our glass fabrication facilities to create the resulting sculptures. So as I was running through these sculptures, I took those prompts out and used them kind of as headers to create a speculative fiction, science fiction, speculative fiction story set like 1,500 years from now in a post-climate change future. And one of the things that I found out was that I kept running into biases in ChatGPT itself. I kept trying to create a heroic protagonist and happy endings. So I constantly had to guide it in my prompts to kind of remember the established narrative structures that we had come up with in the past. Thank you. But it also surprised me. There were some moments where it had ultimate, beautiful creativity. And in this scene, it had created a network of the sculptures that I asked it to describe. And that network started communicating with itself in clicks, chirps, and hums. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. So then I used another AI program called Refusion, which creates an image, a black and white image called a spectrogram, that when read back into an audio program produces complex audio. And then I took those 10-second little snippets of audio. And I took those 10 seconds, mixed them with real world samples to create what I'm calling a sound sculpture, describing those clicks, chirps, and hums. So at the same time, I took the kind of chapter headings from the story, created paintings from them, and then used those paintings as seed images for a series of animations. Now, that was using Stable Diffusion. And one of the things that I found while I was producing these animations was that, okay, so I want to talk a little bit about output. So I'm going to start reading because it gets a little bit more legalese here. So I made these works to tease out some of those questions that I stated at the beginning of my presentation. What does it mean to create? Like, if I put these out works, do I consider them mine? And would they be be received as my works once I exhibited them. As it happens, the US Copyright Office ruled that same month in March of 2023 on its first AI and copyright case. So in another case just brought before a federal judge in September, they ruled that copyright law is limited to the original intellectual conceptions of the author. And so the animations that I created are kind of my darlings of the exhibition, but they might not legally be mine. In this image, this is from the Forum's documentation that I used, and it's asking users to break copyright law if they ended up using the resulting images in for commercial use. But this is why a lot of image creator, like image generating AIs, if you read the end user license agreements, you don't actually own the images that you're creating. You can't copyright them. So there's kind of holes on either end. So there's holes in terms of the data sets being used to train the data. And in another case, Getty Images, who's a massive repository of images, sued Stability AI, who provides AI trains the AI for things like stable diffusion, because they believe that they had been training their AIs on Getty's licensed images. And indeed, when I was making my animations, frequently there would be this strange little gooey watermark that is indicating that they were training the images using licensed images. So this is an open and evolving question. Today, the US Copyright Office has an open forum for public discussion around copyright use. So I encourage us all to meditate on the ways that AI can be used creatively and ethically and help shape the future of legal precedent around AI and for creative use.
Thank you, Dr. Holberton. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Bryce Westlake, from the Department of Justice Studies, matching victims and offenders in child sexual abuse videos and images. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Westlake.
Thanks very much. Nice, easy topic to finish off on everything. So we have a problem. There's this increasing amount of child sexual abuse material that's being disseminated online through various mediums, and this production is outpacing the ability for law enforcement to combat the problem manually. In addition, as no surprise, I'm sure for all of you, is that this creates a lot of psychological trauma and distress to a lot of the investigators, and so there's high burnout rates. And so there's this movement that's been happening over the last decade to try to transition more to automating as much of this process as possible. And one of the main ways that that's been done is matching new content that's found online to databases of known content through a process called hashing. And this can be beneficial in work, but it doesn't help when there's new content being found because it needs to be in the database to match. It also is predominantly image-based, and as the internet has increased its speed and access, we're seeing a lot more video that's being produced. So these databases don't help in that regard. So there's this idea, well, let's turn other things, biometrics, and the most common is facial recognition. And this definitely has some improvements, but there's also some limitations to it. Right? There's times where the offenders will hide the child's face. There's also issues with low resolution on videos that can make it difficult to detect. And of course, getting into that idea of machine learning is children lack distinct facial features a lot of times, and so it's difficult to make those matches. And so one of the ways that's been suggested of trying to improve on this is using multiple biometric markers together, such as a person's voice, or soft biometric markers, such as skin, hair, and eye color. And these are useful. They can help combat some of the deficiencies of using just one biometric marker by using multiples. And so to work on some of this, we developed the Biometric Analyzer Network Extractor, or BANE. It's called that for a reason, because I wanted Batman involved in that. So anyway, in it, we fuse voice and face together to try to compensate for one missing or issues with them. And so we also incorporate other things to kind of filter out some of the results. But we take this even one step further. And the thing is that we know that children are often victimized by multiple offenders, and multiple offenders victimize multiple children. And so we can integrate a lot of social network analysis into this process where we can start finding links and connections between faces and voices across multiple videos. So this is just a quick little screenshot diagram of being able to take pictures and videos. These are open source movies and so forth, and be able to create composite faces and voices from that and start making the links and connections between that you wouldn't be able to make manually. You know, when I talk about increasing amounts of content, we're not talking 100 or 200 or 500 videos. I'm quite literally talking 10,000 and 30,000 and 50,000 videos. So, you know, these are important to keep in mind. So what we've started to do is we've transitioned this to the cloud because obviously processing 50,000 videos is a big process. And so we can work on the cloud, and we thank Oracle for that, who's played a big role in that process. We've been working with law enforcement to start implementing this within real world investigations to see how it works in real time. And they've loved it. One of the main things was you'll take a suspect's computer and download all of the media files. And on it, they have CSAM, but then they also have videos of their kid's birthday party or something. Well, what's being happened is usually that stuff would just be discarded. It's not going to be in a database. It's not CSAM. But what they've been able to do now is the program flags, hey, you know what, in that birthday party, there's actually a kid in the background. Well, that video now actually links to all of these videos over here. And you can go to that suspect and be like, hey, who's this kid in the background here? We need to know who this person is because there's someone who we're looking into elsewhere. So we've been doing a lot of that, testing it throughout the world in different areas to make sure that it works the same everywhere. And so now we're getting into this process of incorporating more features so that you can offset the limitations of each one on its own, such as being able to tell the difference between Canadian and American English, being able to adapt through artificial intelligence matching capabilities so that if you have two features that match, you can lower the threshold on the third to be like, well, it doesn't meet that threshold, but since these other two matches are there, it's probably a match. We've also been using this to integrate, and there's ethical issues, which we can talk about later, of being able to scrape all the information from a video that's being disseminated on a website and identify people across websites and link them together and say, hey, this person is distributing, you know, this child across all these websites, and pull information from those websites about those people to find them. And so thanks, everyone. I want to make sure that I point out Australian Institute of Criminology and Oracle, who have previously and are ongoing with their financial and funding support and resources support for this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Westlake. So now it's time for our Q&A. So if you give us just a second, we're going to reconfigure the front of the room a little bit. Speakers, when we're ready, we'll have you come up and sit so you can take some questions. I hope you've been jotting down all of your thoughts and questions as the speakers have been doing their presentation, and then we'll give you a chance to have a conversation. Just as a reminder, we actually will not be taking questions from the online folks due to delays in the stream. All right, our speakers, you want to grab a bottle of water, make your way up to the front. I'm going to get my notes too. All right, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your hand. And wait.
Sure. My name is Haywood, and I'm the founder and CEO of Datasophical, or a cybersecurity solutions company. And I have a question for Dr. Aronaki, who I actually had the honor to do research with on recommendation systems when I was at San Jose State. And my question is, we're working on a large language model for our cybersecurity customers to ingest cybersecurity data and documentation, but some of the data we train on could easily be confidential, and some of the data, like the prompt inputs, could also be confidential information. So is your solution helping to like make the not only the data we train on more private, but the prompts more private? Just trying to understand the privacy solutions.
So, first of all, I have not worked with LLMs yet, so this is kind of maybe some other colleague might know more. This is a very new project we're doing, and we've started small with the core user item preferences. We have not looked into text yet. This is our next step to see how we can hide the demographics and all of this confidential information you might want to hide. So definitely, yeah, if you are using it, because I know for the startup, probably, yeah, be extra careful and make sure it's, I don't know, it is a very new technology, so it's very, very tricky to not get into gray waters.
Right.
Yeah, but sorry, I cannot help more about, we're still very early research.
I actually have a follow-up question for Dr. Akame Suresh. You were using videos, these are street-level videos, you talked about drones. What are the privacy implications of using that type of data to train models?
We use data sets that are hand-curated in some sense. All the license plates are blurred out, faces are blurred out, even the drone video set, several things are blurred out. But it doesn't guarantee that it's absolutely privacy aware and whatnot. But yeah, that's our approach to not using anything that reveals private information.
Yeah. Just a reminder for the members of the panel, if you have something that you want to add to an answer, if you want to jump in on a topic, please feel free.
Yeah, I guess kind of. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
This is a discussion.
Follow up to this, and I didn't have time to go into everything I wanted to go in. So just be aware. The user should be aware. Anything they post online, it becomes public domain. So especially, and I had a lot of TikTok related news stories there, because lots of teens use the social media and everything becomes public. So then LLMs and all of this generative AI technology can access it and use it in ways you might not want them to use it. We've heard, yeah, and there is going to be a lot of fake videos with child pornography, for example, and this is starting to happen. So yeah, that's just one related comment I want to make.
And I'll just kind of piggyback on top of that, and the way that a lot of the folks who broker in data for training get around licensing issues because they don't actually use the image itself. They'll use like a direct, like a link that points towards the image. And then the training model goes in and kind of just does an analysis on it. It's never the image that kind of transfers hands. And so I would imagine that the same would kind of apply into like privacy law, where, you know, the data itself might not actually move from a server at all.
Yeah, I just to follow up directly on that, but this getting around implies that there's an awareness that there are legal protections that people have decided do not matter because they want to build a thing, and often they want to monetize a thing.
Well, the law doesn't exist yet, right?
Ethics in AI, we need to acknowledge that that's not okay, and maybe, you know, just have a community where AIs and companies that make them that are like, we don't care about actual existing claims on your intellectual property, where we basically create blacklists and will not work with them, where they get throttled.
And I can imagine a future where purveyors of trustworthy data like libraries or educational institutions might actually be written in and remunerated for as stewards of that data. And I think that that's a big part of this question, you know.
Question? Yes.
Yeah, so I have so much to ask. So I'm in the College of Education, I'm a professor there, and have a lot of critical perspectives on AI. I want to share two headlines. Class action lawsuit accuses Oracle of tracking 5 billion people. And another one is from the intercept the invention of ethical AI, how big tech manipulates academia to avoid regulation. The power imbalance we have in our society is huge, and I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on the ethics of just, is there such a thing as ethical AI when it's based on the extraction of the theft of data that have not been gathered ethically they've been gathered without consent. So that's just kind of the large question of, can there be really ethical AI? There's talks of exforgement, with like deleting data sets that have not been gathered ethically. But the one question I have around this very last one, thank you, that was really thought-provoking, positive potential use of AI. But what about people who get caught in the crosshairs with false algorithms? So I know of a story of a family where they had taken pictures of their baby who had a rash to send to their telehealth provider, and they were flagged as having been engaged in, child porn, kind of thing like that. And there are so many stories of people who are being falsely accused of either cheating or whatever that it is. Do you talk about some of these trends, or just, I know I just asked a lot.
It sounds like there's sort of two big questions there. So direct the
AI,
yeah. So we'll direct the first one on sort of the accuracy of model training. So I'm looking at Bryce.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, it's interesting that Oracle's finally getting caught on that. When I was hearing some of the different data various we'll keep it broad, various tech companies have with things, I was like, oh, that's a lot. I'm like, wow. Not surprising, but it was really interesting to just actually, when we started, how in depth it is, like how much stuff they have. And I have my cybercrime course, their assignment is, one of their papers is, go do a search of yourself online, go do a search of me, compare the results and see what you find. And they're usually shocked by the amount of information that's out there. And more specifically, the key thing all the time is, I never put that there. And I'm like, I know you didn't. None of you did. And so there is that. When we look at algorithms and how things are trained, yeah, there's a lot of issues around that. And that's what I was mentioning with our ethics and how data is collected. You have people who consented to being included in a study, and it's considered a great database. So then suddenly that's shared all over the place. And people are like, whoa, 20 years ago, I agreed to be in this study. I didn't agree to the 50 studies that have been used for that afterwards. And then, there's various issues. There's the concern about, well, what is considered public and private? I mean, you can, and that's one of the things that ethics boards and stuff find challenging, is because if I go out into the middle of the park out there and I take a picture of somebody, that's perfectly fine. You are in a public space. Well, I didn't consent to it. Well, that's okay. You're in a public space. I can do this. Well, a website is a public space. It's in a lot of them, you don't have to have an account to access them. So is that different than me just going out onto the street and taking a picture? Some would argue yes, some would argue no. There's this issue about this implied privacy, which I don't think that there's a straightforward answer to it, but I think it's an issue within society where there's this belief of implied privacy. And it's like, no, if you're posting something on Instagram, you can't get upset that it got somewhere. You made that decision. And we've seen that with crimes where people have posted their crimes. And it's just like, wow, like people rob banks and they describe what they do or how they defrauded credit card companies and then get upset that they got caught. It's like, well, stop doing this. And it's just amazing. But then, you get that issue around how these are built. So with us, one of the challenges we face was with the voice recognition in the face is obviously we don't want to test it on or train it on child sexual abuse material. But for anyone that does work in these algorithms, it doesn't work very well if it's on data sets that it hasn't been trained on. And so for ours, we were testing it initially, the tool, on adult pornography. Thankfully, before Pornhub had their big, huge thing and locked everything down. So we're like, we have our data. But interestingly, a lot of the issues that we faced and tried to resolve with the adult pornography obviously are completely different than the child sexual abuse material. So actually the problems we were solving didn't appear. But also it meant, well, these algorithms are trained on adults. And so we're like, well, it's not going to work as well on kids. And so we had this discussion as to whether using videos of kids who are unboxing of things on YouTube, whether we felt it was ethical or not to use those videos to train our models, because we said, well, it's somebody who has more than say 30 or 50 videos. They have so many followers. They're creating a brand. They've put themselves in the public sphere. So therefore, they are consenting outwardly for their appearance and everything to be out there, but we're also not getting their specific consent. So you start getting into this ethical question of, well, is it how much does a person's own behaviors lead to this? And so, yeah, there's a lot of challenges around that, and it's hard to determine what is the correct model to take with all of that. Just nice short answer.
Richard, I want to follow up because I feel like there's, we're talking about consent and privacy, and Rhonda had a really interesting point about who are the stewards of good data, which is an interesting thing to tease out a little bit. I kind of want to go back to, well, I'll start with 1984 and what Shane was saying, but what Etienne said about agency, right? And voice within a democratic system. And it strikes me that we're wrestling with a different problem today. Beyond just having voice or the perception of voice, right? There's this idea that social media gives us all a platform, and you, I think, expertly sort of talked about amplification and how you can do amplification. But my question is, data seems to be power and agency, and when I think about it, I'm struggling to untease how we actually have a conversation about that in an intelligent way that people can engage with to help change the narrative. And I'm just curious, where's data fit into your sort of idea about voice and access to data?
Yeah, I mean, that's a loaded question. There's a lot of things to say, but all very interesting and important points. I think that the first thing is that, I think that there was kind of this excitement when social media emerged, right? That there was going to be this kind of democratizing force, basically, compared to traditional media. Because, I've talked about social media, but the traditional media ecosystem is also a mess, right? It's also dominated by money. It's also dominated by advertising. So there was this kind of enthusiasm. I don't know if you remember, I teach some of that stuff, right? It was a moment of the Arab Spring. People were like, finally, pro-democracy activists are going to use social media and change the world. And then I think we're entering a more pessimistic phase where we're realizing that a lot of these promises have kind of not materialized. So when I say, for instance, some people feel that they've not really been inspired by social media platforms. Some of the criticism that inspired me in that research came from the queer community. There's a lot of queer activists that are online, and they're just we don't feel that our voices are amplified at all. We post content and it is flagged as sexually implicit by people at Meta, and it's just taken down, right? So that's kind of where my reflection comes from. Data, I'm not sure. Is your question something where can we get the data to understand better what is going on?
No, my question is more, it feels like another barrier. Data and access to data is another barrier to voice of agency.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The normal, just a human without power, an agency granted by either position or by funds is just further disadvantaged from having true voice of agency.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's one of the content that I had in my slide is something like digital literacy and access to data. So you can think about it into a kind of a, do you actually have access to a platform, a place where you're going to be able to express yourself? And historically, it's interesting to think that some social media platforms have offered sometimes free access to their platform to some people in developing countries. And for a lot of people, it was actually the only access to the internet. So that's also interesting. It raises a cool question, right? Because then you kind of have to accept the terms of the company if you want to access the internet generally. But I also think that everyone is in a very different situation, when it comes to digital literacy, leisure time, and money. And those is really influence whether or not you're going to have a presence online, I think, right? So I think we need to think about what we could do in contemporary societies, like a wider range of people, not just people who like have come to master social media or people who have a lot of time to spend on social media, can kind of like contribute to democratic discourse. Like part of what I'm talking is like it's a tiny part of the solution, right? It's just like we can maybe play with recommendation algorithms to see what would happen. Like what kind of content would ends up like circulating on social media platform, and see if that would have equalizing effect. But it's a tiny proposal, a tiny part of the solution. We might need to think like, about what we could do society-wide to make sure that like people have an opportunity to really contribute to public discourse. If you think about the traditional media ecosystem, I think it's like a very, very tiny part of people get to contribute to democracy discourse. Sometimes we're invited to go on TV, but like we're university professors. Think about all the people who don't get to do that. So yeah, thorny question, but very important points you raise, I think.
Well, piggybacking off of that is that they've seen some of that when looking at movies and box office stuff. There's been situations where you'll see Twitter back in the day was you'd have like all these people saying, oh, how bad this movie is and everything, and they're like, oh, so they're lowering their projections of what box office sales will be, and then they're like, hey, wait, why is it completely different? How did this excel when everyone said, oh, it's terrible? And it's like, well, the thing is that, as big as especially people in North America want to believe Twitter is, it's a very small percentage of people, and it's a small percentage of people that are having their voices amplified. And if that's not the same ones that are going to the movies or in that discipline, then there's an incongruency between it.
Yeah. I think we have one time for one more question, and this person right here has will ask it, but. The reason we're going to stop now is because we have food that we would like to feed everyone. But please, for folks who still have questions and still want to ask them, our speakers are going to be here. And we definitely want to continue the conversation, just maybe over some food. So go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try not to keep people from their food too long. I'm standing up because I'm kind of blocked by everything. So hi, I'm Charlie Herron from University of Advancement. Last night, the Silicon Valley Community Foundation hosted a conference with a lot of very high-powered philanthropists talking about the need to incorporate democracy and considerations of protection of democracy into their pillars. The call to action was, you have your 3 priorities, make democracy your 4th. And there was a kind of a contentious debate. What is the balance of forces between people who want to use AI, particularly image-generating tools, for good and for ill? And there was a lot of pessimism in the crowd that we are about to experience a sort of unimaginably bad wave of distortions from deep fakes, for example.
Mm-hmm.
The example was given of, you're going to be seeing lots of pictures of Joe Biden falling downstairs and things like that, right? That just aren't real. And I was thinking in the back of my head, well, aren't there also going to be all these actors out there using these tools for good, or creating tools to counteract those? So Etienne, I'm kind of directing this to you, but I think there's an applicability across the panel.
Yeah.
What is the balance of forces? What should we expect in terms of the kind of good guys, the Batman? If you,
well, I can tell you all the ways that my side can be used for negative too.
Trying to counteract. Thank you so much.
Okay, I can go ahead, but then it looks like Bryce has some things.
No.
Bryce may have to rescue me. I'm like struggling to answer something like that. So yeah, I'm not sure. Like again, like it's a question with many parts. So if I don't address that, I can be concerned. Just like let me know. But like weirdly, I'm kind of optimistic about the future of social media, and I haven't been for a long part of my life. But I think that like one of research project that like I don't have right now, but I would like to develop in the next few years is something about how we could like think about democratic governance at the level of platforms, right? And like there's kind of a productive exchange to have between like computer scientists and philosophers and political scientists. We're really thinking about like, if we really want the users to be in control of the platform, what do we do, right? Do we just like design feedback surveys? Like, did you like that post? Rank that post. Do we like mimic the democratic process, mimicking, Congress and having like chambers of people that have the power to make decisions at the platform level to like make decisions like that? I think like it's really exciting to think about what would happen. And you can be pessimistic and be like Meta and ByteDance and Google are never going to want to have that if it like impedes profit maximization too much. I'm not sure this is true. I think that there's a lot of people like us working for these companies that like have very similar credentials that we have, didn't get a job in academia, they end up working for them. Maybe their proposals end up like, being shut down by another team that disagrees about things like that. But I think that like if I had to make a prediction, and I was in an interview with someone from Google asking me to make this prediction, it's very hard. I think that like we're going to see more experiences like that in the like next 5 to 10 years. I think big platforms are going to try to like experiment with democracy. And one of the reasons they're going to do that is that like one thing that I'm not optimistic about is the legislative process about big tech in the United States. Like there's like no single serious piece of legislation restraining big tech action that's like been passed in the last 10 years. We all know those kind of Senate hearings where like Mark Zuckerberg gets like grilled by other people. It's kind of a show. Nothing really happens. So I think that like, and that addresses part of Roxana's question, which is like, we might have to collaborate with big tech to the extent that it seems that like the state is not fulfilling its function when it's coming to like regulate it. So like it's sad, but maybe the best shot we have is like trying to have some sort of influence in the inside, right? There's a lot of problems with that solution, but yeah.
Can I just quickly?
I was going to say, I see a lot of nodding.
So there's also the question of, and it dovetails a little bit with Richard's question around kind of the value of the data. And one of the reasons why, like social media platforms that would be distributing, AI videos of Biden falling down the stairs, one of the reasons that would be seen is because of the way the algorithms are set up for viewership, right? And the reason that the algorithms are set up to maximize viewership and kind of enrage people or serve them the most kind of anger inducing content because it increases engagement because their platform isn't actually social media, their platform is data, right? And as long as these platforms are free and they're brokering in data, we're going to see a bunch of garbage online. But what is going to happen is when our feeds start becoming infiltrated with AI garbage, people are going to stop engaging. So I think the business model will have to change, and we'll have the algorithms driving the content will have to optimize, the things that people want to see rather than like the things that, cause the most rage, because we'll become numb to it. So that's just a little bit of hope.
Just one comment on that is that when we teach AI and when we teach machine learning, it's important to make that part of the curriculum, which Magdalene also touched upon. And this is something I've been consciously doing for the past few years. Whenever we teach an algorithm, we tell them that if you get this result because your data is this way, and reinforce the fact that, there is data, but how do I use it? How do I use it more responsibly?
Yeah. So I'm less optimistic about social media. The more I know how they work, and the more I read about, regulation in the US is hilarious. It's horrible, but for us, maybe a funny video of somebody who didn't do something because it's fake. It's nothing. Look up Myanmar and Meta's role in that. It is a really sad situation. So we're still in a bubble here in the United States. It's still our first world problems. They can do much more harm. So regulation is one thing. Europe is way ahead, not great, but way ahead from the United States. And as you said, if you look at the Zuckerberg's testimony in Congress, it was funny. I mean, the questions was, we're many years behind. And then the other thing is we should educate. So the only thing we can do, I don't think we can fight with the big tech. We can fight by educating users to be digital citizens. These apps are free, but they're not free. They're getting your data in return. So data is the gold, right? That's what I tell my students. So I think at least one thing we can do is educate more, both those who will be using them, but also those who will be in stakeholder positions in these companies, at least make decisions, the right decisions.
But I think you need to, and just close off, I think we need to realize changing of times with things. One of the things that I notice when I'm talking to students who are older, I'll say like our age versus ones who are younger, which is most of our students, is their views and opinions of privacy are completely different. They've grown up in an entire world where they've never had privacy. You look at people like ourselves, you're like, wait a second, you needed a phone book and stuff to look up my name and all these people to figure out this and this. And you talk to students and you're like, hey, you can look up a person's address and get your number and do this. They're like, yeah, okay. And that's about it. And so, you know, there's this difference in perceptions of that. And I think the other main issue, it seems weird to say, but we've advanced too quickly. And all of you have antivirus and internet security stuff on your laptops and computers. I bet you most of you don't on your phone. You might, but you probably don't. Where do you do all your banking and where do you go all over the place? With your phone. So why is your security way less there? Well, the reason is because we had 10 to 15 years to drill into everybody's head. You need a firewall, you need an antivirus, you need a firewall, you need this internet security. Now you've had smartphones that have replaced it, and that advertising campaign and pushing that hasn't existed because it's happened too quickly. And so everyone is ill prepared for all of this. And so that plays a huge role in it as well.
We do want to continue the conversation, but take a moment with me to thank our speakers. Of course, Richard and Shannon for speaking. I'm going to hand it over to Richard.
Well, I just want to say thank you. This was fantastic. This felt really lively. Let's get some food, let's eat, and let's get the conversation going.
Thank you.